What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from Mtg, and I got your Rivals of Ixalan Prerelease guide right here. So, there's a lot of cards to go through. I'm basically going to give you my favorite commons and uncommons in the format for sealed play in each color. So that's a lot of stuff to discuss. Let's go ahead and kick things off here with just some general advice about the format. Well, first things first, your resources for the event are going to be 6 packs of cards. You're going to get 4 packs of Rivals of Ixalan and 2 packs of regular old Ixalan. And you'll also, by the way, get a random foil, rare, or mythic from the set that's, stamped with the date, just so you'll remember it. You can put that right into your deck if you want to. And with all of these cards from these packs, you got to whittle it down to a 40-card deck. And that includes basic lands, which the shop will provide. Now, as far as this format, specifically Rivals of Ixalan Sealed, I think that it's at least as fast as Ixalan Sealed, which is to say, a step or two faster than usual. This is a very fast-looking environment. Wizards has provided us with lots and lots of aggressive early drops to get on board. And in any sealed deck, you want to make sure that you fill your curve out. You want to have 2s and 3s. You want to resist the temptation to just fill your deck with a bunch of 4 and 5 drops that look awesome to you. That's true in any sealed environment, but I think it's even more true in this one, considering how fast things look. Just make sure you're playing a good amount of 2 and 3 drops, even if they don't look especially flashy. Make sure that you're filling out your curve in this format especially, so that you don't fall behind against people playing aggressively, and so that you can take advantage of people who aren't playing aggressive enough. And before we get into the individual colors here, I just want to cover a couple of cycles of cards that I think are just kind of blanket good. Starting with the Forerunners, if you even just have one other creature in your given Forerunner's tribe that's worth tutoring up, which a lot of them are going to be, then it's probably worth playing a Forerunner. A body that tutors a body is almost always going to be good in sealed. Be careful fixing your next draw step, but for the most part, statistically, a body that tutors a body is going to be incredible in this environment. There's also a cycle of gold uncommons. These are, for the most part, very playable. Some of them require specific tribal synergy, like the Lords and the 4-mana pirate guy, but for the most part, all of these are very playable. They might not put you into a color combination by themselves, but they may go a long way towards considering a color combination. They're all good. But now let's look at the individual colors here, starting with white on the color pie. White is a very aggressive color in this sealed environment, from what I can tell. White looks to be the most aggressive color. It's got some decent combat tricks. A lot of its bodies are good, and it's even got some fair removal. White looks to be a good color. So let's look at the commons and uncommons, starting with the commons. I really like Exultant Sky Marcher for just 3 mana. Having a 2 power and 3 toughness flyer, that's actually really good in this format, where there are a lot of 2 power flyers. There's also Sun-Crested Pterodon. I don't think this is incredible, but I do like splashable 2/5 flyers. I think 5 is a really important toughness in this sealed environment. We've got spells in red, 2 different spells in red actually, one of them common, that does 4 damage to creatures. So having 5 toughness is really good, and having flying is nice in this case. You know what they say, booty, 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 blocking in the air. I also like Martyr of Dusk. This is already a 2-mana, 2-power creature, at least a decent 2-drop by itself, but when it dies in combat, which it will almost certainly do within a couple of turns, it'll at least replace itself, but it getting you in a better board position so long as you trade it in combat. You both lose a creature, but you get one back. That's pretty good board position, and board position is everything in sealed, so I like Martyr of Dusk. And Legion Conquistador makes a reappearance in this set. A little confusing, but we'll definitely take it. This is a great card in any limited environment, and even in Standard, this has made a splash. In Sealed, this is fantastic, and I like that it's in Rivals, actually, because Rivals is a much smaller set, giving you a statistically higher chance of finding a given common. So if you get 3 copies of Legion Conquistador, I would say definitely play it. This is card advantage that always tutors for bodies, which is awesome, and not to mention that we're trying to get to Ascend in this format, and this helps you get to Ascend too. There's a lot of good things about Conquistador. White even has some decent removal in the common slot, like Luminous Bonds, which actually looks awesome. It's just a pacifism that costs an extra mana, but we'll take that. That's really, really good in Sealed. It's just more or less unconditional removal, and combat's the most important thing about Sealed. So essentially removing a creature's ability to participate in combat for just 3 mana is definitely a deal we'll take. There's also Divine Verdict. You're never going to be super thrilled about playing this card, but it's always been playable in Sealed. No different here. As far as the uncommons, I like Everdawn Champion. This isn't in any specific special tribe or anything, and that does hurt its playability slightly, but it can just block against every ground creature in the format and laugh and not care. We essentially got a Chomeno's Revolutionary in a way. I like this card in sealed an awful lot. Again, just going to block huge dinosaurs all day and not care, so it might be worth going off of any tribal synergies you're attempting. Also like Imperial Ceratops. This looks unassuming at first, but a splashable 5-mana 3/5 is already at least a decent rate. That's a good body for the rate. And the fact that it's going to help you stay alive when it blocks is awesome. This can gain you like 4-6 life over the course of the game. I can see a situation where that happens very easily. And even if it needs to attack, it can do that too. It's not a bad card. Also like Majestic Heliopterus, that's a silly name for a card, but still a decent card. This can represent like 5 or 6 power swinging in the air. So I think that's definitely a decent rate for that kind of attack power. Baffling End is an obviously good piece of removal, maybe the best white uncommon in the set, for that matter. I don't have to go too much farther than this, just premium removal, super cheap, super splashable. You're going to play every copy you get. And then finally, there's Pride of Conquerors. I'm a little bit on the fence about this, but this looks like a sweet combat trick. Love that it's instant speed. When you actually do have a send, the card is unbelievable for only 2 mana. But even if you don't have a send, just a +1/+1 bonus on your whole team for just 2 mana. As a surprise, is actually not too bad at all. Overall, I think White's got a lot going on in this sealed environment. Again, it's got decent removal, it's got aggressive bodies, and it's even got some stuff up there, 4 and 5 mana on the curve, that I wouldn't mind playing at the common rarities. So I think White is a really well put together color in this environment, and I'll give it a B+. Now let's look at the uncommons and commons in blue. Now, blue is a tricky color, and it always is. It's going to have a bunch of tricks and stuff in it, and sort of off-kilter and off-color stuff in it. But I think that blue is a little bit more aggressive this time around, and I like to see that in blue, especially in a limited environment. So let's look at these commons first. The first common I want to look at is not super aggressive, but it is an important common. One of the most important commons in the color, and that is Waterknot. Waterknot is essentially just 3 mana removal that's a little bit tough to cast, but despite it being tough to cast, I still think that it's very much worth playing. I also like Crashing Tide, and I don't think that you have to have a Merfolk to make this card playable. Even a sorcery speed bounce and then get in with your dudes after drawing a card too, that's probably good. Just bouncing the biggest creature, getting in a decent attack step, drawing a card, all that's awesome. But if you do have Merfolk, card gets even better. The floor on this card is pretty high. There's also Deadeye Righauler. I'm a big fan of this, man. It's splashable, decent body, 3 power is not bad at all. And being able to, especially if you're ahead, set back your opponent's tempo is sometimes backbreaking, and it's not hard to activate Raid, even in a color like blue. Just told you, blue's pretty aggressive this time around. You can really put your opponent way behind with a card like this. There's also Kitesail Corsair, which may be hands down the best blue common. The fact this is a 2 mana 2/1 flyer and it's common is crazy. And I know it doesn't fly on your opponent's turn essentially, but you're going to want to be aggressive with a card like this anyway. So I like to look at this as if it doesn't have flying, you're doing it wrong. Now in blue, there are 2 cards that I'm rating pretty highly, 1 common and 1 uncommon. And both of them Luis Scott Vargas rated fairly low. Now he's looking at limited as a whole, which includes draft. Draft and sealed are completely different environments. I think they get lumped together way too often. They are very, very different. But I'll at least give you a heads up and say that the next 2 cards I talk about are cards he rated low, but I think he might actually be wrong on. The first of which is Soul of the Rapids. To me, it's unbelievable that this is a common. 2 toughness is not great, especially considering, I'll give you the caveat, that there are more flyers than usual in this sealed environment. Take that away from this video too. There's a lot more flying than you would usually see in a sealed environment in Rivals sealed. So a 2 toughness flyer doesn't go as far as it normally would, but flying and hexproof creatures are almost always good in a sealed environment, and 3 power flyers are usually 5 mana. So I don't think this is a bad rate. It's nearly impossible for your opponent to do anything about. So if you get the blue-black sealed pool that has a good amount of removal, or the blue-white sealed pool that has a good amount of removal, then I think that you can use this to your advantage to win yourself games. You can probably do 9 damage with this thing super easy over the course of a game, as long as you have some removal to back it up. Make sure that the air isn't too clogged up. I like this card. Now, as far as the uncommons, I'll start with Slippery Scoundrel. Now, this is a slippery slope grading this card, because honestly, it's just a Scathe Zombies a lot of the time. 3 mana 2/2 is not great. That is not a card you want in your sealed deck, but 3 mana 2/2 unblockable hexproof ends games, son or daughter. whoever you are listening. So this looks fantastic to me as long as you get it. You know, as a top deck, you know, you're probably only going to get one copy of this if you get it at all. So getting it on turn 8 or 9 seems like it would go a long way towards winning you the game, because just like the last card we talked about, it's nearly impossible to do anything about, and it's almost always going to deal damage for you. So I really like this card. I don't think it's near as hard to hit Ascend as a lot of people think it is, especially in Sealed, where by turn 6, you probably have Ascend. Turn 7, almost certainly, as long as you're getting your land drops. By the way, another quick word of advice as far as Ascend goes: if you have more than 1 or 2 Ascend cards in your deck, or Ascend is a heavy theme in your deck, which I kind of advise against as a whole, but if you have maybe 2 Ascend cards in your deck, you might want to consider an extra land. 18 or 19 lands might be important then, because you want to make sure that you hit your land drops almost no matter what until turn 6 or 7. Another strong blue uncommon is Siren Reaver. No questions asked. This is maybe the best blue uncommon in the entire set right here. And it's kind of not hard to see why. It's a low-cost, high-powered blue flyer. It's good. There's also Riverwise Augur. Love this thing. You know, it's a 4-mana 2/2 body that draws you a card. You can look at it that way. But if you get something like Evolving Wilds in your sealed pool, then you can always, you know, shuffle away the 2 bad cards you put back on top. So there are ways to abuse it, but either way, I think a body that draws you a card is pretty much always playable in sealed. I should also mention Expel from Erazka. In Sealed, I'm not usually a huge fan of bounce effects, although I've pointed out 2/2s so far. In this format where things are aggressive, tempo is going to matter a lot more than usual in Sealed. I think bounce is a little better than usual, and a 2-mana bounce spell, essentially a Disperse, is really good. And if you do have Ascend, these Time Ebb kind of effects in Sealed are unbelievable. Replacing your opponent's draw step when they're in top deck mode in Sealed is great. And finally, I want to call a little bit of attention to Aquatic Incursion. This doesn't look like the best card in the world. You know, just 2 bodies. They do have hexproof though, so that's pretty awesome in Sealed. But 2 bodies for 4 mana, only 2 power spread among them. That's not the best deal in the world. But if you have even just 1 or 2 Merfolk with, you know, 2 or 3 power, this can be a great card. It's a mana sink, gets you guaranteed damage every single turn. I like an awful lot about this, as long as you have a few Merfolk to support it. Same thing with Silvergill Adept. I'll finish off the blue uncommons with that. Silvergill Adept looks, I mean, it's always really good, right? You know, it's played in Modern, for God's sake. So the card is pretty good. Even if you have to pay the extra mana for it, still drawing a card on a body is always going to be good. Overall, I think blue has a lot of situationally good cards this time around, but that's, you know, blue's no stranger to that. I think that there are some trap cards in blue, but for the most part, especially the blue creatures, got much better in the Sealed. Things are a lot more aggressive. So I'll give blue a solid C+. I don't think that it's got a whole lot of finishing power, although I do love all the unblockable creatures. All right, now let's take a look at the black commons and uncommons. Black got a lot of really good removal in this set, but I'm not so sure about the creatures. As far as the commons go, though, we'll take a look at Impale first. Impale is a premium common. If you get a couple of copies of this, it could probably put you in black, because you have to be fairly committed to black to cast the card reliably, but I think it's absolutely worth it. Just destroy a creature is wonderful. So you'll take that in Sealed every time. The card is obviously good removal. There's also Moment of Craving, which is pretty good removal and much more splashable than Impale is. And it doesn't look like much at first glance, but there's a ton of 2 toughness creatures in this format. Even at 4 mana, there's a butt ton of 2 toughness creatures in this format. So Moment of Craving is a lot better than it might look at first glance. And even if it doesn't look great, I gotta tell you, it's removal. Removal's always playable. And there's Dusk Legion Zealot. You know, the body isn't too much, but a body that draws you a card is good. I've said that now 3 times in this video, and it's no less true than the first time I said it. Drawing a card for a body, especially for only 2 mana, that's good. Now, those are all of the black commons that I really want to talk about. I don't think there's a whole lot that's, you know, really high level beyond those 3 cards. But the uncommons, there's a lot of good stuff. Starting with Ravenous Chupacabra, which is almost certainly the best black uncommon by an awful lot. This is a body that kills something, which is pretty much the best kind of card you can play in Sealed. So play every single copy of Chupacabra you get, and that can easily put you in black too. There's Sadistic Sky Marcher. This is an awesome creature. Flying, 2 power, 3 possible mana, but sometimes even if you have to pay 4 mana for this, it's not terrible for a 2/2 flying lifelink. You'll take that. But in the rare occasion you can actually cast this for 3, it's unfreaking believable in Sealed. You'll play it. There's also Golden Demise, which is probably worth main decking in this Sealed with all the, you know, good, effective, aggressive, low-cost creatures. I think Golden Demise is awesome. It's cool that we have an uncommon sweeper. And another awesome piece of black removal is Reaver Ambush. It's easy to think of this format as just like a bunch of big dumb dinosaurs that this isn't going to hit, but actually, again, really aggressive format with lots and lots of stuff this can eat up. And finally, let's look at Mausoleum Harpy. I haven't seen a whole lot of people harping on this card, pun intended, but it looks pretty decent to me. You know, 5 mana, splashable for that matter, for a 3/3 flyer is actually always been a decent rate in sealed. That's essentially the baseline. But once you get a send and you start sending things through in combat, things can get out of control. I can see a world where this becomes a 4/4 or a 5/5 flyer, at least somewhat easily in the very, very late game. And it's going to keep your opponents from wanting to remove your guys once you do have a send, which is a position no one wants to be in. You know, if they remove 2 of your ground guys in combat, suddenly you have a 5/5 flyer and no one can deal with that. So I really like Harpy, actually. I think it's decent already at its rate, and it's just nothing but upside from there. Now, I'll give black a C+ this time around. It's got all of the amazing removal. Now, like red and white have good removal, but black has insane removal this time around. Some of it on bodies, like, it's just looking really decent to me. But the bodies themselves aren't looking too great. I don't like a whole lot of black's creatures in this sealed, but aside from that, they have amazing creature removal, so I at least have to give them a C+. You know, it's not a bad color at all. It looks like a decent support color, but the problem with that is that so many good black cards require commitment to black. So suss that out however you want to, but at least things like Impale and Ravenous Chupacabra, you don't have to play until turn 4. So even if black is your secondary color, you should have enough sources to get to these really good cards by the time you hit turn 4 or 5. Now let's look at the commons and uncommons in red. Red is a pretty decent color this time around. That's all I can say about it. Decent removal, decent bodies, looks relatively well balanced. So let's look at the commons real quick. There's Bombard. I think this is awesome. This is one of the best red commons in the set. Easy peasy. You'll play every single copy you get of it. Splashable, instant speed, 4 damage to a guy. It's exactly where you want to be. This is one of the better removal spells in the format. I also like Frilled Death Spitter. I don't like the 2 toughness on the card, but it is really, really aggressive. You know, if you're building a very aggressive limited deck, I think this is one of the better red creatures in the set for you. Even if it does block and die, or get blocked and dies, it's still going to take a chunk out of your opponent's life total, and a 3 mana 3/2 is at least a decent rate to start with. I also like Sun-Collared Raptor. I think this is a great common mana sink. You know, you're going to need a couple of mana sinks in a deck, usually in sealed. And this is an awesome one. You know, it's not terrible on curve. It's kind of not ideal or anything, but it's not terrible on curve. And if you get it in the late game, you can sink all your mana into it and essentially make it enormous. And finally, there's Mutiny. I love a lot about this card. Sealed, well, again, revolves around creatures. And on turn 4, 5, or even later in the game than that, anytime later in the game than that, you can bet your opponent's going to have 2 creatures, and the odds that one of them can kill the other is at least relatively high. Statistically, I think you got a great chance of one creature being able to kill the other. And obviously, once you get to turn 5 or 6, your opponent may have 2 or 3 different creatures out. And there's just no chance that this can't kill something on your opponent's side of the field for just 1 red mana. This card looks awesome to me. As far as the uncommons in red, we'll start with Reckless Rage. It can trigger Enrage on your dinosaurs, which is really relevant some of the time, and it's a decent pseudo-combat trick, you know? If they swing in, you chump block with a guy, you can always kill one of their dudes and block with your small guy. And just go ahead and deal the 2 damage to him, you know. The creature it blocked is considered blocked, doesn't do any combat damage, and you still get to kill a guy. Just for 1 mana, that's a decent, again, pseudo-combat trick. So I like a lot about this card. 1 mana is exactly the right rate for something like this. Also, like Charging Tuscadon, this is actually ridiculous looking to me, and it's even better that they gave it Trample, so it facilitates its own ability. This is a must-block creature, because it's just going to chunk for 8 if it ever actually gets through, and your opponent cannot let that happen. So in the meantime, they're just going to be chump blocking it, one would assume. But even if they chump it, then it's still going to get through for 1 or 2, and if it gets through for 1 or 2, it's actually getting through for 2 or 4. I think this is easily one of the strongest red uncommons, by a lot. Aside from that, there are a couple of niche red uncommons that I at least want to bring up. The first of which is Needletooth Raptor. This looks like a very solid uncommon, don't get me wrong. But if it does block, it'll almost certainly die. But the best situation you can put it in is blocking a creature that it trades with and killing something else. You're essentially getting a 2 for 1, and it's removal on a body. So removal on a body, again, one of the best things you can possibly do in sealed. So I like a lot about this. It's not Ravenous Chupacabra, but it is maybe the next best thing, and it's a lot more splashable than Chupacabra is. And there's also Stormfleet Swashbuckler. I don't know how relevant Ascend is going to be on this card, but I do like that it's a 2-mana 2/2. We actually don't get those all the time in red. Usually we see like 2-mana 2/1s. Actually, it wasn't that long ago that we started seeing 2-mana 2/1s. And we're like, holy crap. But in any case, red 2-mana 2/2 is at least a decent curve filler. And if you get it on turn 8 or turn 9, when you do have a Sin, this is a fantastic top deck too. You're only spending 2 mana for a creature that can deal 4 damage. And even though I don't necessarily like auras and stuff in this sealed, I feel like we have way too many bounce effects for auras to be really, really good. This is the kind of card that they are awesome on. Red doesn't have the removal black has, but at least has some removal and really, really good bodies pretty much everywhere on the curve, or at least passable bodies everywhere on the curve from 2 all the way on up. So I think the red is a slightly better color, even if it's just balanced, you know, which is more than you can say for black. The removal in black is ridiculous, but no good creatures almost. So as far as that goes, I'll give it to red a little bit over black here and give red a B. That just leaves one color to talk about. Here are the green commons and uncommons. As far as the commons in green, I'll definitely start with Jungle-Born Pioneer. This thing looks like it just does work, man. 3-mana 2/2 that puts another body with Hexproof on the battlefield. What more do you want from a common Magic card than that? Especially in a format like Sealed. Again, board presence is everything. This will put you way above your opponent, especially if you get it on the play. I like a lot about this card. It's extremely aggressive, increases your board presence by a mile early in the game, and is even a decent top deck. This is easily one of the better green commons. Another one that I find crazy, though, is Overgrown Armasaur. This thing looks unbelievable to me. You know, a 5-mana 4/4 is already at least a decent rate, in Sealed at least, but the extra value you can get off this, if you just get, you know, 1, 2, or even a couple of more Saproling tokens out of it, you've gotten all the value you want. Really, if you just get 1 Saproling token out of it, ever, I think you've gotten all the value you need. 5 mana, 5 power, 2 creatures, all that's crazy. And anything after that is just gravy. Delicious gravy. I love this card, and it's ridiculous that it's common. It's also worth pointing out that Hunt the Weak is a common this time around. Sometimes it's an uncommon, but it's always a good card, especially in the sealed environment. 4 mana looks like a little bit much, but a counter's good, and fight effects are really good in green, especially in sealed, where green just doesn't have a lot of options for decent removal. I like this card a lot, always have. Not going to change that now. Finally, there's Hardy Veteran. This looks unassuming at first glance, and it's off tribe, I guess. You know, humans are sort of the hidden tribe in Ixalan, but I still think this is very much worth taking a look at. A 2-mana 2/4, as long as it's your turn, essentially, is just, that's very, very good, you know? This is a great way to fill out your curve, get something in the early game, you know, and if you get this on turn 2, I think it's going to attack really confidently for at least a couple of turns, if not more. I just love the idea of having this card in the early game, and even in the late game, it's not the worst thing ever. So I like a lot about this card. As far as curve fillers go, it's fantastic. As far as the uncommons in green, there's a bunch of stuff I like here too. There's Crested Herd Collar, good value creature, 5 mana for 6 power on 2 guys is pretty darn good no matter which way you slice it, so we'll take that whenever we can get it. Swift Warden has good stats for 3 mana. 3 mana 3/3 is already good enough, but the fact that you can essentially play this as removal is awesome. It's gonna be few and far between that you actually get to use its, you know, intended purpose for real, but if you do have another Merfolk that's being targeted by an Impale or Ravenous Chupacabra or whatever, this can essentially just be a huge blowout. If you can play this card at its full potential, it's ridiculous, but don't feel like you have to, because a 3 mana 3/3 that you can play with Flash is fine already. Speaking of 3 mana 3 power creatures that are crazy, Thrashing Brontodon, ladies and gentlemen, this is already crazy stats. 3 mana 3/4 is awesome in sealed and really almost in any environment that's a playable rate, but it also has this cool ability where it busts up enchantments and artifacts. There's not a whole bunch of artifacts that I really care about in this sealed. There are a couple, so it's sometimes relevant, but there are a lot of enchantments I care about. You know, there's some white enchantments that are essentially a removal, like Luminous Bonds and Baffling End. Don't feel like this has to be in your sideboard or anything. You know, 3 mana 3/4, good enough stats all day. And finally, there's Strength of the Pack. I like the way this card plays in this environment because it goes well with pretty much every tribe, no matter what. Yeah, it goes good on dinosaurs, but it goes good on merfolk and vampires and stuff too, depending on what color combination you're in. You know, it just makes all your big dinosaurs bigger, but on boards of vampires and merfolk with lots of tokens and stuff on them, this can be just ridiculous too. Make all your small guys huge. So, you know, every set has to have a green overrun type of effect. And even though I think 6 mana is an awful lot to pay for it, I do love that you get counters. That is definitely worth playing. Now, overall, I think green is another really aggressive color, but it's also got the big drops, the big fat dudes in the end game to really back it up, you know? It doesn't have really a whole lot of good removal to speak of, just hunt the weak, but that's green. Dims to breaks, kids. You know how it works. So it really works overtime in getting a lot of good value creatures this set. So I'll give green a B too. I think this is a very attractive color in the sealed. But pretty sure I'm tapped out for this one. That's my pre-release guide for this time around. Hope you enjoy it, and I hope it helps you. You know, you can also sub if you're new and hit the bell for the notifications. Deck Tech season right around the corner. Waiting on the banned and restricted announcement. That's coming up on Monday. Don't want to put out a Deck Tech and then just Energy cards get banned and everything's different. That would be dumb of me. So wait until Monday for the B&R announcement to get the Deck Techs. But you do want to get the notifications in your inbox when I put them out, so sub to the channel. You can also follow me on Twitter, another way of knowing when videos come out, at SBMTG Dev, or you can throw me $1 of your hard-earned cheeseburger money over there at patreon.com/SBMTG. And if you want to support the channel for absolutely free, you can check out the first link in the description box down there to take you over to my sponsors over there at TCG Player. The good people at TCG Player. They've got the cheapest pre-order sealed product you could ever hope to find for Rivals of Ixalan. It's about $92 a box on pre-order right now, which is a crazy price this close to release. So go check them out. Hit the first link in the description to help the channel. But in any case, pretty sure that's all I got for now. I'll catch you cats later. I'm Dev from SBMTG. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Remember to spread love and be kind, especially at your pre-release. There's a lot of people, I know usually this is where the video would end, or would cut to some kind of end card with a funny song or image or something like that, but pre-release is an event where there's going to be lots and lots of players. A lot of them are new. It might be their first time. So heed those words. Spread love, be kind. It's a lot of players' first times. It's a lot of players. This is the only events that they go to is pre-release events. So spread love, be kind, help your fellow man or woman play Magic. So in any case, I think that's all I got to say. Thanks for watching, my wizards.